The Five Nights at Freddy's franchise hardly needs an introduction anymore. What began as an indie horror title has now grown into 11 wildly successful mainline game releases, dozens of novels, and even an award-winning film, with a sequel dropping any moment now. With the IP now worth in the hundreds of millions, it's hard to imagine that this multimedia horror franchise has its roots in Christian-oriented children's games. This is the story of how Scott Cawthon would go on to create Five Nights at Freddy's. Cawthon's introduction into game development came pretty early into his life. When he was in his early teens, his mom bought him a copy of a program called Click and Play. In case you're not familiar, this was a simple drag and drop game making tool from the 90s, mainly used in classrooms and after school computer labs. It wasn't built for anything ambitious, but it was enough to get Scott experimenting. And while the projects he made in it weren't meant to go anywhere, the software did exactly what it needed to. It sparked the interest that would push him further into this field. After those early click and play experiments, Cawthon eventually pursued computer graphics more seriously. In 1996, he studied computer animation at the Art Institute of Houston. This formal training gave him one half of what he needed. He understood how to model and animate characters now, but actually turning those assets into functioning games was an entirely different skill set. The other half of the equation, actually building the game, he had to figure that out on his own. And this came through ClickTeam Fusion. This was a simple programming tool that allowed developers to create games through a script-free system. Throughout the late 90s and the early 2000s, Cawthon juggled odd jobs to support himself. He worked in programming, retail, and whatever else he needed to keep afloat. At the same time, he was also honing his skills in the software, making games on the side whenever he had the time. These, however, would only ever be passion projects, not even coming close to paying the bills. And this was starting to become a problem. With Cawthon's growing financial pressure, he didn't have the luxury to spend his free time on pursuits that weren't putting food on the table. By this point, he was married with 2 young kids. He needed to make more money if he wanted to sustain this life. Still, he kept creating. Among the projects from this period were The Pilgrim's Progress, the video game, and The Desolate Hope. For whatever reason, however, the reception for these titles was simply not there. His next entry, however, Chipper & Son Slumber Co., would mark a turning point. Released in 2013, it was meant to be a harmless, family-friendly resource management game featuring a cartoon beaver and other woodland creatures. Cawthon handled everything: design, code, art, animation, using the same techniques he'd spent years refining. But when the game hit Steam, players didn't see it the way he expected.
I like to think that Chipper here, the little fellow, is just forcing these other beavers to chop forever against their will. They want to die. They know they should die.
People joked that it looked like animatronic animals trying to act cute. This response crushed him. After years of financial strains, the idea that he couldn't even make a simple kids game sent him into severe depression. He briefly even considered leaving game development altogether, convinced he'd wasted his career. But in that criticism, there was something that he hadn't recognized yet: an opportunity. Cawthon took a step back, re-examined the reviews, and there it was, right in front of him, his eureka moment. If people thought his character designs looked like haunted animatronics, then why not lean into that? Instead of fighting his natural style, he could make it into his greatest asset. This realization would lead him into a completely different genre than he was used to, the genre of horror games. Cawthon didn't want to make another big, sweeping epic like his previous games. It was simply too much of a commitment. Instead, he focused on creating a shorter experience. Because the experience would be brief, Scott wanted players dropped straight into the action.
You know, everything is designed to where you see everything right away. You know, as soon as you jump in, you're in the experience, you know, and so it doesn't matter if it lasts for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, you know, you're in the middle of it right away.
The premise he came up with was pretty simple. You're a night shift guard stuck in a security office, checking cameras, rationing powers, and trying to keep the monsters from reaching you. The monsters in this case were chosen to be animatronics. Now, this wasn't just a random choice. Obviously, the previous criticism had a part to play in this, but in interviews, Cawthon also explained that he'd been afraid of animatronic animals as a child, something that he believed was a near universal fear amongst kids. So he took that childhood unease, paired it with his natural uncanny character designs, and built a setting around it. And there you have it. Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria was born. In regards to the animatronic designs, the core 3 characters, Freddy, Bonnie and Chica, just seemed natural during design, and he didn't plan for them too far in advance. When deciding on the 4th slot, however, Several animals were in the running, including a fox, a wolf, and a beaver. Ultimately, as we all know, the fox design won out. Cawthon spent around 6 months building this game, working almost entirely on his own in Click Team Fusion. For playtesting, he turned to a small circle of trusted people, his kids and a few close friends. They helped him catch bugs, adjust difficulty, and refine the moment-to-moment gameplay. Scott has said that one of his favorite memories from this period came from testing the game with his children, specifically the first time they were hit with a jump scare.
You know, I had a good seat behind both of them, so I was able to get a good view of them playing and what they were playing and everything. And I knew what was coming, and they had no idea. and you know, and the younger of the two, he got jump scared by Bonnie, and he just launched backward in his chair. You know, good times tormenting the children.
After the final rounds of testing, the game was finally in a place Cawthon felt ready to release, and so on August 8, 2014, Five Nights at Freddy's finally launched. Now the launch was pretty quiet. No marketing push, no hype cycle, just a small indie title uploaded almost silently onto the Sura and later Steam. The initial reviews and reactions though were anything but small. At first it was just a few comments, a couple of players saying that the game had surprised them, and then a clip popped up online featuring someone's reaction to the game, and then another, and then one more. Within days, every Let's Player had their own videos on it, with their clips getting shared across the internet. The tension, the unpredictability, and those jump scares turned the game into instant reaction bait. Before you knew it, everyone was watching, and once they were done watching, they were heading to the store to buy a copy for themselves. For Scott, watching the game blow up in real time was surreal. After everything he'd been through, the criticism, the doubt, the years of financial strain, the idea that people were not only playing his game but loving it felt like a complete emotional whiplash. In interviews, he's talked about this moment with a kind of disbelief, and looking back at where he'd been just a year earlier, it made sense. The same stiff, uncanny animation style that once got him mocked had now become the foundation of a viral phenomenon.
You know, I remember whenever I released it, you know, I didn't get it on Steam or anything. It was a website called Desera at the time, which was just more immediately welcoming of, you know, anybody who wanted to post games. I think there are other sites that do that now. But, you know, I was watching the download count on that, and I was watching it just kind of skyrocket. And, you know, and eventually my wife would come over and she'd be like, let me look at the number, She'd come over every 10 minutes wanting to see, because she was just astonished at how quickly that number was just going from, you know, 5,000 downloads, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000. It was just going through the roof just by the minute, you know. And it really, at the time, I was just kind of enjoying it that evening. I was like, well, you know, this is great, you know, this, you know, but it'll be over tomorrow, you know. And that was really my mindset. It's like, oh wow, this is, you know, it's a big spike. Everybody's really enjoying it. I wonder what I'm going to make tomorrow. You know, I had no idea that 4 years later, I was still going to be in the middle of a bunch of, you know, Five Nights at Freddy's projects.
Five Nights at Freddy's didn't just succeed, it completely reshaped the indie horror landscape. And it all started with Scott Cawthon alone at his computer and knowingly creating what would become one of the biggest franchises of all time.